Hi everyone, welcome back to Operational Technology Security. Today we'll discuss Stuxnet. We'll fully dissect it, we'll go end to end, we'll try to understand exactly how it worked with lots of technical details, and we'll attempt to fully understand its operation from the initial infection all the way to infecting the final PLC and the operation of the ICS. Why do that? Well, there are two major reasons. One, there are a lot of technical lessons learned on the way. We'll see Windows vulnerabilities, we'll see software vulnerabilities in the Siemens software, we'll see PLC issues, DLLs, autorun. We'll see so many things and so many lessons that can be extracted from it that will be very, very useful when we decide our security architecture, when we decide how to protect our system. So Stuxnet has a lot of lessons to be learned at the technical level. A second is that after seeing how Stuxnet worked, it becomes very clear that there's nothing you can do to prevent the attack. The attackers will find a way. If they really want to attack, they'll find a way, one or another way, to make sure they enter the system and they deliver their attack and their objective. So it is very important to have a proper post-attack response. It's not enough, I keep emphasizing that, it's not enough to say, don't worry too much, I'm too strong on the defense side, no one is going through. Well, Stuxnet kind of motivates that attackers can go through no matter what you do. So it's equally important to ensure that after an attack takes place, that you have a proper response to the attack and ensure that you have proper graceful degradation of the system, a way to recover quickly, a way to respond quickly. All these things have to be in place in case of an attack. I want to say that there's a lot of technical content in this module, split over a few videos. So it will revisit concepts that you may have learned in application security, network security, or computer security classes, but still, you don't have to fully understand everything. The point of the whole module is to motivate the need to come up with specific solutions when we discuss our security architecture, to learn what can go wrong, and also motivate that things may go wrong and what do we do with that information. So let's dive in. What is exactly Stuxnet as a reminder? Stuxnet was first uncovered in 2010 and it targeted a very specific internal control system, and that would be a Siemens one, a Siemens SCADA system. It had checks in its code that it ensured it only affected facilities with a very specific physical layout. And that was an indication that the attack was very, very targeted. It also targeted specific variable frequency drives that are attached to Siemens PLCs and operate at a specific frequency range, ranging from 807 Hz to 1210 Hz. Typically, those motors wouldn't operate in those frequencies. The only exception would be gas centrifuges. So given all the above, the exact layout of that was targeted, the exact frequency, the exact specifications of the drives targeted, it is clear to say, it's obvious that Stuxnet targets specific Siemens control centrifuges that are used to produce enriched uranium, and that's the gas centrifuges we discussed before. And given the configuration it was targeting, a potential target that was on the most affected facility would be a uranium enrichment facility at Natanz in Iran. Quick executive summary. Stuxnet was malware, and it replicated automatically through both removable media like a USB drive and through the network. So it used both ways to propagate. It had the ability to update itself through a peer-to-peer mechanism. Because Stuxnet was affecting the PLC, it had to be connected to the computer that was connected to the PLC. And these computers were not connected to the internet. So to get updates to the command and control center, it had to have a mechanism for getting updates through from the computer that had internet access all the way to the computer connected to the PLC to ensure that it was able to update itself. So it used a very sophisticated peer-to-peer mechanism. It had a command and control center that allowed both Stuxnet to be updated, and also it allowed hackers to execute any code. So the malware after installation, Stuxnet, would also listen to commands, and those you can just send commands to be executed directly to on the PC that Stuxnet was infected. It had a rootkit that hid its binary, so whenever you were looking at the directory to see files, the Stuxnet-related files were missing from there because it was intercepting the Windows API calls for directory listing and was excluding its own binaries. It did check for specific antivirus products and found ways around them. There are a few that they couldn't find ways around them, but for most of security products, they had different loading and injection mechanisms. It fingerprinted the specific intrusion control system in terms of the type of centrifuges used and in terms of the number of them. So it was looking for very specific information in order to deliver the attack and potentially sabotage the system. And it also, besides being a rootkit for Windows, it was also a rootkit for PLCs. So the operator was not able to see the payload that Stuxnet was sending to the centrifuges. The operator would see normal operation, while Stuxnet would send different packet frames to the controllers in order to spin the centrifuges wildly and eventually destroy them. So it was both a rootkit for Windows and a rootkit for the PLCs. So Stuxnet, as I just said, it spreads both with removable drives like a USB and through vulnerabilities that can be exploited in the local networks. It is speculated that the initial infection happened through a USB drive that at some point arrived within the air-gapped facility. After a USB drive was inserted, then Stuxnet would load itself into that computer and would find different ways to spread further. So it had many ways to spread further. One would be a printer vulnerability that you can write itself as a file to be printed and then make itself being executed in the host machine. It was using an SMB vulnerability to self-replicate. It was copying itself in network shares. That's not a vulnerability. It was just copying itself in another computer if the network shares were enabled. It was using hard-coded passwords in WinCC database. That's a Siemens software. So it could copy itself in the database, and then it also exported itself as a file into the computer and it was executing itself. Or it was able to copy itself into Step 7 projects. So whenever these projects were copied from one computer to another, Stuxnet was also moved along. So the point of the propagation is to go to some entry point in the network and ensure that there's so many different ways to hop throughout the network and eventually arrive to that control computer that has the Siemens software installed that talks to the PLC, and that Siemens PLC is connected to the centrifuges. So the whole propagation mechanism was to arrive to here and then perform the malicious action, the final objective that will be to spin the centrifuges with improper frequencies. And because these control computers here are not connected to the internet, as we just said, there was also a peer-to-peer mechanism. So this computer may be connected to the internet. So it would just get a new version of Stuxnet, and then through computer-to-computer connection, it would go back to that control one and update Stuxnet there for the attack again to take place. Sample timeline taken from a Symantec report. As we said, Stuxnet was discovered in June 2010. It was first reported as Stuxnet. This comes from the stub in as the binary was reverse engineered, and it was found and it was reported that it's using one of these vulnerabilities that we'll see. It was actually using many more, but that's what it was first identified of doing. But you see, before 2010, there were many other things that have happened. So this attack spans across many years. They use vulnerabilities that were there before and also new vulnerabilities. But some things, for example, for the rootkit side, because it needed signed drivers, there was also stolen certificates that happened again in previous years. So after Stuxnet was first discovered, then it was things moved quickly. Microsoft released advisories for some of these vulnerabilities. this certificate that was used for the rootkit aspect was revoked, and then another driver was also revoked. Was actually using two. Stuxnet was using two. Patches came out, and then at the end, the command and control center traffic was blocked, and those servers were not listening anymore to Stuxnet. So as you see, the attack was discovered in 2010, but it took many years of preparation, and it was actually many years active and doing the ICS attacks. In terms of infection statistics, as of September 29, 2010, about 100,000 infected hosts were identified by Symantec. And Symantec actually set up a system to monitor traffic to Stuxnet command and control servers, because when they reverse engineered Stuxnet, they saw the URLs that Stuxnet was talking to and tried to see what traffic is going to those IPs. So they identified more than 40,000 unique IP addresses for over 155 countries. So you see that even Stuxnet was very targeted for a very specific facility. It did spread uncontrollably, and it was discovered in many more locations of the world, not just a specific facility, but more than 150 countries. Approximately 60% of the infected hosts were in Iran, as you can see from this graph here, that most infected hosts were in Iran. Iran also exhibited the highest percentage of Stuxnet infected hosts with Siemens software installed. So many of, as Stuxnet was propagating through, it was trying to find a Siemens machine. Even if it didn't, it would still try to propagate further. So you would have many PCs that don't have a Siemens software installed with Stuxnet. So the percentage of Siemens, non-Siemens were much higher in Iran. So most hosts with Siemens software installed were located in Iran. And that's, again, another indication of how targeted the attack was. Infection of new IPs per country, you see this system that Symantec set up to monitor the infection. So they were checking which IPs were talking to and from which countries. And you see Iran had a lot for many days. And then there was a sudden drop around 22nd of August. That happened probably because Iran blocked at the country level the traffic to the command and control center. And that's why that was reduced, but the other countries didn't, and it took some time for the traffic to subside and be reduced. And at the end, the servers, the two URLs used, were decommissioned, so no more communication will be possible. Symantec has identified 3 attack waves that happened in different times, and they can say with certainty what the waves were because the binaries had some compile time, and also Stuxnet was keeping a timestamp of infection time. So they would compare the two, and they will see from the binary compilation to the infection time, how much time did it take. And some of the infection times, it may have taken for some domains, 5 domains were affected, and some domains took 26, 27 days to be infected because things had to be propagated, or that USB drive, at some point, someone put it in their laptop that was connected to the business network. So 5 domains were affected, and 12,000 of these infections can be traced back to these 5 organizations. Cluster of infections are very interesting to see because they show a lot how Stuxnet work. Each infection, so you see the 3 attack waves we discussed, 2009, 10, and March 2010 and April 2010, 3 attack waves. And the red dot is the initial infection. And then you see how the infections were spreading further. And then we can see many of them were kind of sequential in nature, right? So Stuxnet was not trying to fully propagate everywhere. It was just trying to do lateral moves and ensure that it goes from hop to hop to arrive to those computers of interest. And if we are to focus on one of them, on domain E attack, then you can see that from the point of infection, there were a lot of hops, like sequential hops. So that means this linear branch indicates that a single infection affects one computer and not many more. So moving from computer to computer, at some point, Stuxnet was able to reach that final computer that was connected to the PLC. And the infections were primarily linear because Stuxnet, within its code, had a rate limiting threshold. So, for example, one of them is that the USB would delete itself. The USB infection would delete itself after the third infection. So it was trying not to spread uncontrollably in the beginning, but as we saw before, it didn't happen. It did spread a lot, but it had rate limiting code to ensure that it's mostly targeting hop to hop, like linear branches, and not so much a wide tree. And Stuxnet propagation was mostly LAN based, so it wasn't using the internet to find new ways to infect. So it was assuming at some point it would enter a facility and only try to attack through the local network. So it was assumed, the final target was assumed to be in close proximity with the initial seeds.